West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, there is no one, and I mean no one, whose name has been more tempting to New York City's tabloid newspaper headline writers than the man who testified to the Manhattan grand jury today in the investigation of Donald Trump. He was the boss of the National Enquirer, who entered an agreement, conspiracy of sorts, with Donald Trump and Donald Trump's then lawyer, Michael Cohen, to bury stories about Donald Trump, especially stories about Donald Trump and women. It was what they called a catch and kill scheme at the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer would catch the story by paying a woman for the exclusive rights to her story about Donald Trump, and then the National Enquirer would never run that story, kill the story. Catch the story and kill the story. And the woman would not be able to tell her story to any other news organization because the National Enquirer would own the rights to her story. And then Donald Trump would reimburse the National Enquirer for whatever that cost the National Enquirer. That was the plan. That was the scheme. That was the conspiracy. It didn't work out quite that way when Stormy Daniels' lawyer offered the National Enquirer the rights to her story about one night she spent in a very brief sexual encounter with Donald Trump, according to her story. The boss of the National Enquirer decided to just put Michael Cohen in direct contact with Stormy Daniels' lawyer at the time so that Donald Trump, through Michael Cohen, could just buy Stormy Daniels' silence directly. That didn't mean that the boss of the National Enquirer escaped prosecutors' attention. When they were prosecuting Michael Cohen for violating campaign finance law in an attempt to affect the outcome of the election by making a $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels 3 weeks before the 2016 presidential election. Because silencing Stormy Daniels was beneficial to the Trump campaign, to put it mildly, the $130,000 violated campaign finance laws by exceeding the limit of campaign contributions and by not being recorded as a campaign contribution. The boss of the National Enquirer, who was supposed to be the mastermind of the catch and kill scheme for Donald Trump, was a man named David Pecker. Here is how the New York Daily News greeted the revelation in court in the Michael Cohen case that David Pecker was a witness in the grand jury investigation. There it is. That was the front page of the Daily News when they found out David Pecker was forced to go under oath in the Stormy Daniels investigation by federal prosecutors. Tomorrow's Daily News may have a headline of a similar spirit to convey the news that David Pecker testified today to the Manhattan grand jury that is investigating Donald Trump's involvement in the Stormy Daniels payoff. Because reporters are staking out the Manhattan courthouse, they can usually see who is coming and going at the grand jury room, but they have no idea what the testimony in the grand jury room actually is. David Pecker was reported as having testified to the grand jury in January. In a moment, we'll be joined by a former Manhattan district attorney, assistant district attorney, who will share his invaluable insights as to what could bring a witness like that back to the grand jury. After Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to federal crimes in the payoff he arranged to Stephanie Clifford, the actress known as Stormy Daniels, he testified to a House committee that the National Enquirer had what he called a treasure trove of documents about stories that the National Enquirer killed for Donald Trump.
You also mentioned that the president was very concerned about the whereabouts of these documents and who possessed them. Does that treasure trove of documents still exist?
I don't know. I had asked David Pecker for them.
So you would say the person who knows the whereabouts of these documents would be David Pecker?
David Pecker, Barry Levine, or Dylan Howard.
The other two men worked for David Pecker at the National Enquirer. Donald Trump spent the weekend lying about the Manhattan District Attorney's grand jury investigation at a campaign rally in Texas that attracted a much smaller crowd than Trump campaign rallies used to attract. Donald Trump said the Manhattan District Attorney was working, quote, under the auspices and direction of the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. He, of course, called it the Injustice Department. And that is a lie. The Manhattan District Attorney operates with complete independence, as does the Justice Department, and they are both completely independent of the other in their current investigations of Donald Trump for a range of crimes that he may have committed. Donald Trump hearkened back this weekend to his life before politics, telling the following lie to the Texas crowd. I was leading this life. I didn't know what subpoena meant. Donald Trump has been hit with subpoenas in civil lawsuits virtually every year of his professional life. He's also issued subpoenas in federal lawsuits, as all litigants are allowed to do, virtually every year of his professional life. Donald Trump has had subpoenas flying back and forth in his life every year of his life. Donald Trump's name had been on more subpoenas than any other president in history before he entered politics. And he has set a record for presidents and former presidents being subpoenaed since he entered politics. Stephanie Clifford has offered very detailed evidence, including dialogue, describing her evening in a hotel room with Donald Trump. She has described what he was wearing and then what he wasn't wearing. Stephanie Clifford has quoted what Donald Trump said about how she reminded him of his daughter. At his rally on Saturday, Donald Trump offered a few words, and I mean very few words, of some sort of denial, apparently referring to what happened in that hotel room. Here is a picture of Donald Trump and Stephanie Clifford, also known as Stormy Daniels. He said in Texas this weekend that I never liked her. Except he didn't say her. He used a nasty term that he thinks is a clever insult about her looks, which, as that photograph proves, Stephanie Clifford is a far more attractive person than Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump said this, and if you have trouble following this, remember, this is Donald Trump talking when he is trying to lie about his evening with Stormy Daniels, so he struggles with each sentence or attempt at a sentence. This is what he said. He said, it's just not a terrible thing. That wouldn't be the one. There is no one. We have a great First Lady who people really do love, and she has done an incredible job. Not anything. They have nothing. That's Donald Trump apparently trying to say, as he has said before, that if he wanted to have an affair, it would not be with Stephanie Clifford. That wouldn't be the one, he said. And then he realized that some of the people in his Texas audience might still be conservative enough to think no one would be the one to have an affair with. And so Donald Trump caught himself and on the next sentence said, "There is no one." And that's when the logic of what he was supposed to say, that's apparently what was in there. That's what he was trying to say. And the logic of that would mean that the next sentence would be, "I love my wife." Something like, "I love my third wife, and I have always been strictly faithful to my third wife in every sense of that word." But Donald Trump could not bring himself to say any version of "I love my wife." Something politicians usually find pretty easy to say, no matter how true it is or isn't. Instead of saying "I love my wife," Donald Trump said, "We have a great first lady who people really do love." And he didn't even bother to count himself among those people. And then he gave his wife what Donald Trump thinks is the greatest possible compliment he could ever give a Trump wife. She has done an incredible job. Imagine you're Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers tonight, looking at the documentary evidence of the $130,000 sent by Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels' lawyer to pay off Stormy Daniels, and you're looking at the checks Donald Trump wrote to Michael Cohen to cover up that payoff. And you imagine putting your client, Donald Trump, on the witness stand in Manhattan in his own defense, and then you hear him say to an audience of a few thousand Trump fanatics in Texas, "That wouldn't be the one." Meaning, I, Donald Trump, an expert on Donald Trump having affairs, insist to you that's not a person Donald Trump would have an affair with. And then, as Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, you listen, hoping that your client, Donald Trump, can find a way of saying, "I love my wife." And he's never been under more public pressure in his life to say, "I love my wife," and he cannot bring himself to say it. Those words do not cross his mind. If you're Donald Trump's lawyers, and he is indicted in the Stormy Daniels case in Manhattan, you know that your only chance of getting a not guilty is to put Donald Trump on the witness stand to try to convince that jury that the only reason he participated in the Stormy Daniels payoff scheme was not to hide Stormy Daniels' story from American voters a couple of weeks before they voted for president in 2016. It was only to spare the feelings of his third wife, the wife who he says people really do love. If you're Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers, you know that Donald Trump will not have an easy time convincing a Manhattan jury about anything, including how much he loves his third wife, the one he says people really do love.
It is Tuesday, the 28th of March of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Okay, spicy. How are you today? Looks like we are under the auspices of another mass shooting, as we spoke about a bit yesterday as it was coming online. Little kids and their teachers and a custodian. Sub-teacher, too. Substitute teacher that day. My God. Also heard one of the 9-year-olds that was murdered, killed, I don't know, blasted away, was the daughter of the church that the school was affiliated with. The church is right next door, and the school is the auxiliary building. Quite large, actually, even though it was a small school. So, so we got that going for us, and I have not really dove into the dregs of right-wing MAGA world to, shall we say, immerse myself in it and, by osmosis maybe understand what the hell is going on, because you don't need to do that. All you have to do is really just the stench from it. You're around the corner from it, and you smell it, you know exactly what's going on. But one of the things that obviously has come up is the shooter being or identifying as a transgender, a girl who wanted to be a boy. Let's be clear about this. But still went by Aubrey. So what are you going to do? And it could be for any number of reasons. A lot of times we see these shooters acting out because they had been bullied. When they're younger, the more teenage types. So who knows? Who knows what's going on here? I would say that, wow, guns are so easy. Anybody can get them, and they can just shoot up a school. I guess that's fine, huh? Just don't let them learn about Ruby Bridges. Because, I shouldn't jump around. Let me finish my thought about what happened in Nashville. And the idea that guns just are not supposed to be in the equation. It is quite telling that every time we have a mass shooting that gets onto the national, international stage as such, that the usual suspects on the right wing start coming out almost with Alec in a box responses almost, wherein they state that now is the wrong time to bring up the politics of this. Every time there's a tragedy, the liberal, radical, commie left Democrats always want to take your guns away, and now's not the time to let our emotions get in the way of rational thought. And that's the Second Amendment. And our rational thought about the Second Amendment is that we want to make the world awash in guns. Everybody has a gun. There's chaos, anarchy, and who's going to save the day? Yes. You know who will save the day. Why would anyone want to make our society awash in guns, knowing that we're going to devolve into this chaos? Because they think they can lead? Give me some proof of that. But, once again, proof is not in the pudding with the MAGA movement. They don't care about your facts. They don't care about you winning the argument on substance. All they care about is shouting you down. That's their form of debate. Telling that this is a Christian school, that's fine. Presbyterian, that's fine. Cute uniforms kind of reminded me when I went to parochial school. Catholic. That was fine. Anyway, telling that it was at a Christian school. Because we also have Christian schools like Hillsdale. It's just so disgusting what we've allowed ourselves to become. And I'm just being rhetorical here. Obviously, we here in our radio listening land, we're preaching to the choir. But we are awash in guns. No other civilized society acts like this. Which I suppose beggars the question, are we civilized? Oh, well, what are you going to do? Yeah, that's one way to get around it. What are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what we should be doing. We should allow these lawsuits for product liability to proceed, at least. We need to take away these loopholes that gun manufacturers imposed upon the rest of us so that they don't have to worry about what their product does to the world. This gun's not poison. It's a constitutional right. No, it's not. Those guys, obviously we know, they apparently don't know grammar and syntax, and even if they do, they don't care. They counted on the vast majority of Americans, or enough Americans, not knowing syntax and grammar that they could pass off this idea of a constitutional right to own a battle rifle or even an armory of battle rifles. That was never intended. If you want to go that route of original intent, that was never intended. Everybody mustered their muskets at the armory, and when you needed them, you went and got them. They didn't go and get their muskets so that they could take down the elected Democratic government that they were fighting so diligently for. Not against. That Confederate soldier Marjorie Taylor Greene, she wants to take away Joe Biden's Social Security protection. Why? Because of this shooting. It's his fault. Because we're gun grabbers. No, we're not. You don't need a battle rifle. The only reason you want a battle rifle is so you can, shoot a Fed? Coming upon your moonshine still? She's rich anyway. She's part of that good old boy network. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. It's the nouveau riche of the South. Is what she is and her family. Let's buy our way into government. And what's the easiest way to do it? With Republicans, because they're inherently corrupt, obviously. And we have a little story here in the International Chef's Table section about a very conservative Republican enclave state that seems to be under the sway of some hostile foreign influence. Fancy that. A whole state. And they're full of Republicans. Let's not kid ourselves. I just knew, and so did you. Like when Ivana and Donnie started making waves and everything, we all said, wait a second. What's going on with the Eastern Bloc stuff with Donald Trump? Yeah, that was when I started formulating the idea, or came across the idea, but formulating it in some way that the richer you are, the less patriotic you are to wherever you might be living, because your quest for power and money supersedes any national allegiances. You go where the going is good. If you can have fun in New York at Studio 54 and park a bunch of money offshore for the tax break, such as it is, then why not? When they took that away, you can't park your money offshore. Well, then let's take the tax rate down to, 2.5%. How about nothing? The richer you are, the less you have to pay for anything. What? Oh my God. Yeah. I'm rich. Buy my meal. Okay, I'm going to try that sometime. I'm rich. Buy my meal. Okay. I have to confess, this killing of kids at a little school has discombobulated me, and it really it's quite bothersome. Why do we have to live like this? Why? so that a sect of goose-steppers can, I don't know, blitzkrieg us in some way? We're not going to let it happen. All right? Nope. Sorry. We're going to have to man the barricades. And I guess now in France, the barricades are made up of mountains and mountains of trash. Yeah, let's man the barricades. I don't know. I think the barricades should be like a way just to keep everybody away. And apparently it is. Anyway, that's a world away, and we have a curated show for you today, as we do every day that we are here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And so why don't we get into it, since we're just eating up time, and these curated news stories actually have some oomph to them, and I wanted to get them across. So yeah, at the top, that was Lawrence discussing about Trump's latest legal challenge is convincing a jury he loves his wife. He can't even say that. You don't love what you own? Jesus, everybody knows that. Read Art of the Deal. On the rest of the menu, New Jersey will take over the Patterson Police Department a month after city cops killed a well-known crisis worker. Thanks. The Kansas Supreme Court signaled that it still considers access to abortion a fundamental right under the state constitution. Chris Kobach says the Bill of Rights don't apply to that. And Joe Biden issued an executive order that will restrict the use of commercial spyware tools that have been used to surveil human rights activists, journalists, and dissidents around the world. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where black children in England and Wales were 6 times more likely to be strip-searched by the police. And China's global influence campaign has been surprisingly robust and successful in Utah. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left, from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. I know times are tough for a lot of people, but if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, it really does help. And the bills are ever increasing. That's some sort of business model. They never go down. Boy. But anyway, we pay our bills, and that allows us then apparently to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been a powerhouse of resistance for so many years because of the generosity of folks like you. So thank you for that generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary. I know they're trying to make them stories, but they will be diaries because some of us are still old school. Still. Anyway, I post that diary at Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and of course the show notes and links will get you to the actual articles, and you can read them in toto. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Yeah, that's where it is. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Alrighty. A little update on Mom. She seems to be doing a bit better, and I'll tell you why. I do not know, and neither does my sister, who was an RN and specializing in respiratory ailments and therapy and all that for, 30 years total? My God, my sister worked for a long time at one particular industry. Anyway, we did not understand why our mom went home without oxygen. They said she didn't need it. They walked her around and her sats were just fine. And we didn't think so. But I don't know. We're doing what the doctor said, but apparently that's not what the doctor said because she needed the oxygen. And we had a delivery delivered yesterday and all set up, and she slept very well and seems to be a lot more alert. Before she was just kind of, sometimes you'd catch her and she'd be staring into space, while you're talking to her. Mom, are you okay? But, she was being starved for oxygen, obviously. So that's a good thing. We do see the primary today, or actually a partner in the practice. Because the appointment had to be made so expeditiously, and fortunately there was a cancellation, and so we were able to get ourselves slotted in this morning, and we will do that. And we have now oxygen tanks to carry around with us, and a contraption that takes the air out of the air and gives it to my mom. I like that. So I guess she'll be tied to tubes to that respiratory thing that goes in your nose, nostril, whatever. She'll be tied to that now, and that's okay. She, like I said, she seems to be a lot more, perky, and that's good, isn't it? It is. All right. I just wanted to fill you in on that, and so lots going on. And do we separate the personal from the public? I don't know. Not around here. This is confessional literature in the flesh. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Mike Catalini from the Associated Press. New Jersey's Attorney General said yesterday, Monday, that his office has taken control of the police department in the state's third largest city, Paterson, less than a month after officers fatally shot a well-known crisis intervention worker during a tense standoff. Attorney General Matt Platkin said at a news conference that his office had assumed control of all police functions without delay, including the division that investigates internal police matters. His announcement did not mention the shooting of 31-year-old Najee Seabrooks. I didn't mention it directly, but it reflected activist concerns about how the department was being run. There is a crisis of confidence in law enforcement in this city, he said to brief cheers and calls of thank you from the audience. Something has to change, and it will change starting now. Earlier this morning, I exercised my authority as Attorney General and superseded the Paterson Police Department. Platkin said the takeover amounted to a pledge to residents and officers that the state is committed to safety in the city. During a phone interview later yesterday, Platkin said it wasn't a single case that led to his office's takeover of the Paterson Police Department. This is not a step I take lightly. It's something I've been considering for a while. It's been a series of misconducts, a complete breakdown of trust, he said. Issa Abbasi, a 25 veteran of the New York City Police Department, currently serving as Chief of Strategic Initiatives there, will take charge of Paterson's police department in May, Platkin said. He said his office quietly conducted a nationwide search and settled on Abbasi. In the meantime, New Jersey State Police officers will serve, or a New Jersey State Police officer will serve as the department's interim head. Pat Colligan, president of the New Jersey State Policemen's Benevolent Association, which is the union that represents Paterson's police officers, said in a statement that the vast majority of those officers are doing an extraordinary job under very difficult, trying circumstances. Besides the takeover, Platkin said he's implementing some other changes. They include a program that pairs a police officer with a mental health screener in an unmarked vehicle to respond to 911 calls about mental or behavioral health issues. He also said the state will revamp its protocol statewide for dealing with people who have barricaded themselves in a room or building, as Seabrooks had done for more than 5 hours before he was killed. Platkin also formed a working group to study and make recommendations on interactions between police officers and violence intervention officers. The standoff started about 8 a.m. on March 3rd when police were called to Seabrook's brother's apartment where he had holed up in the bathroom. Seabrooks, who was a crisis intervention worker and mentor with a nonprofit Patterson Healing Collective, had called 911 at least 7 times and told dispatchers that people were threatening him and he needed immediate help. Police soon arrived after and talked to him through the door, offering to get him water and calling him love in one instance, but the tension increased when he told police he was armed with a pocket rocket gun and a knife. Police shot Seabrooks when he emerged from the bathroom with a knife, according to the Attorney General's office. His death shook his co-workers who were at the scene and texting with him, said Lisa Chowder, Seabrook's boss at the Patterson Healing Collective. She said Seabrooks had been texting with colleagues, asking to see them, but that police blocked the co-workers from entering the apartment. Chowder said yesterday, Monday, that she appreciated Platkin's decision, but she also called on him to fire the officers involved in the shooting. In the weeks since his death, anti-violence advocates organized a vigil calling for a number of reforms, including a creation of a civilian review board. The New Jersey Institute for Social Justice has called on the Justice Department to investigate the city's police department, and the ACLU of New Jersey said the shooting shows the need to invest in non-law enforcement responses to mental health calls. It isn't clear how long the takeover will last. Platkin said he is in it for the long haul. Hannah of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Kansas's highest court signaled yesterday, Monday, that it still considers access to abortion a fundamental right under the state constitution, as an attorney for the state argued that a decisive statewide vote last year affirming abortion rights doesn't matter. The state Supreme Court is considering exactly how far the Republican-controlled legislature can go in restricting abortion under a 2019 decision protecting abortion rights. The justices heard arguments from attorneys for Kansas and abortion providers in 2 lawsuits, but is not likely to rule for months. One lawsuit challenges a 2015 law banning a common second trimester abortion procedure, and the other challenges a 2011 law that regulates abortion providers more strictly than other health care providers. You know, a broom closet every 8 feet. Legal challenges could have blocked both laws from being enforced. The U.S. Supreme Court declared in June of 2022 that the U.S. Constitution does not protect abortion rights and that states can ban abortion. But the Kansas court had ruled in 2019 that access to abortion is protected as a matter of bodily autonomy under the state constitution. That led the legislature to put a proposed amendment on last August's ballot, asking voters whether to lift that constitutional protection, which would have allowed lawmakers to greatly restrict or ban abortion. Voters soundly rejected the measure. But Kansas Solicitor General Tony Powell, representing the state, told the court that last year's vote doesn't matter and should not factor into his decisions on the two lawsuits, arguing that voters might not have wanted abortion banned but still favor reasonable restrictions, like a broom closet every 10 feet, no admitting privileges, etc., etc., etc. He said the justices should let the people work it out through their elected representatives. Really? Powell told reporters afterward the court is in the best position to remedy any mistakes that it made. I don't think they made a mistake, but that's my opinion. My middle name is Justice. 5 of the 6 justices present for the arguments expressed skepticism while questioning Powell, who at one point said, "I'm doing the best I can." "We had a vote in August and it was pretty overwhelming," Justice Dan Biles told him. "That's the elephant in the room." The justices did ask Alice Wang, a Center for Reproductive Rights attorney representing the abortion providers, whether preserving life was a compelling state interest. She said that question was before the state Supreme Court when it ruled in 2019. This court declined to recognize any compelling interest, Wang said. Kansas allows most abortions until the 22nd week of pregnancy, attracting patients from other states with bans, most notably Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. Abortion rights opponents fear that Kansas courts will overturn many of the restrictions imposed over the past 30 years. The state is asking the Supreme Court to overturn its 2019 decision, but the 2 cases also give the court the chance to narrow that ruling's scope by upholding either or both laws. Many Republicans had expected Kansas voters to approve the proposed state constitutional change in August, and Powell acknowledged that he was boxed in by the state's failure to challenge much of the evidence presented by abortion providers to the trial court judge. Powell repeatedly argued that the justices also ought to consider federal court decisions or even decisions from other states' courts. Just don't look at that vote, please. I think the court should have its blinders off, he said. Among Republican-leaning states, Kansas is an outlier in preserving abortion access, in part because the state's abortion opponents preferred making year-by-year incremental changes prior to last year's U.S. Supreme Court ruling. However, the state still forces patients to wait 24 hours before getting an abortion, requires minors to get parental consent, spells out what patients must be told in writing beforehand, and even mandates that the information for patients be printed in 12-point Times New Roman type. No Comic Sans for you. 3 members of the court's 6-1 majority retired after the 2019 decision, but their replacements were all appointed by Democratic Governor Laura Kelly, a strong abortion rights supporter. Like elections matter. One of the new justices, K.J. Wall, recused himself from the cases, so 6 justices will decide them. The court did not give a reason for Wall's action. Norman Merchant of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. government will restrict its use of commercial spyware tools that have been used to surveil human rights activists, journalists, and dissidents around the world under an executive order issued yesterday, Monday, by President Joe Biden. The order responds to growing U.S. and global concerns about programs that can capture text messages and other cell phone data. Some programs, so-called zero-click exploits, can infect a phone without the user clicking on a malicious link. Governments around the world, including the U.S., are known to collect large amounts of data for intelligence and law enforcement purposes, including communications from their own citizens. The proliferation of commercial spyware has made powerful tools newly available to smaller countries, but also created what researchers and human rights activists warn are opportunities for abuse and repression. The White House released the executive order in advance of its second Summit for Democracy this week. The order demonstrates the United States leadership in and commitment to advancing technology for democracy, including by countering the misuse of commercial spyware and other surveillance technology, the White House said in a statement. Well, that brings us to our break, and let us get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. That was the day that members of AFSCME Local 1644 began their unsuccessful strike in Atlanta, Georgia. The union was made up of 1,300 mostly black sanitation workers. The city of Atlanta had elected its first black mayor, Maynard Jackson, in 1973. According to historian Manning Marabell, members of the sanitation union had campaigned aggressively to help Jackson become mayor. Many thought he would be sympathetic to the needs of working people in the city. The sanitation workers' hopes were disappointed when they received no raises for 3 consecutive years. Their average income was $7,500 annually. This put the workers below the city's poverty line. Since the Memphis sanitation workers' strike of 1968, AFSCME had emphasized organizing black workers in southern cities. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while he was in Memphis supporting the strikers. As the nation mourned the death of the civil rights leader, the Memphis strikers had won their first contract. But the sanitation workers in Atlanta would not win their work action. On April 2nd, Mayor Jackson fired the striking workers. He aligned himself with what Manning Marabell has described as Atlanta's corporations, media, and the leaders of the Black Party's bourgeoisie. Some black leaders publicly criticized the workers for striking against the city's first black mayor, accusing them of undermining hard-won black political power. The city's black middle class, by and large, did not support the strike. After a month, the strike was effectively over. Workers returned to their jobs with no improvements in their wages, hours, or conditions. And the hard-learned lesson that what politicians say at election time is not always what they do once they get elected. Like what you hear? Check out laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 32 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-40s. Rain and snow, I guess they call that a snowy mix, and we do have a winter weather advisory for the region. Looks like a snowy mix at the moment, though mostly rain. And we will, as per the forecast, be cloudy with rain and snow early and changing to all rain, which will become intermittent later on. Winds light and variable, snow accumulations less than 1 inch, and it looks like we're going to get a 1/4 inch of rain. Just rain. Mainly cloudy tonight with lows in the upper 20s, low 30s, winds light and variable, and some clouds and possibly isolated thunderstorms tomorrow. Highs in the upper 40s, low 50s, winds light and variable, and we should get something a little less than a 1/4 inch of rain, and then maybe a bit of drying out on Thursday, and then more rain and snow for days on end, it looks like, on the extended forecast, beginning on Thursday night. Oh, my. All right, so it looks like pollen is still rated as none, though I don't believe it. And that's here in the little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 23 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 3. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.73 inches. Visibility is at 2 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's called the Weather Underground. London is 47 degrees with rain showers. Paris is 51 degrees and fair. Rome is 65 and sunny. Kyiv is 38 with light snow. Kabul is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 51 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees with rain and wind and a small craft advisory on shore and on the bay and a flood watch. And New York, New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Black children in England and Wales were 6 times more likely to be strip-searched by police, according to a report released that found children were failed by those sworn to protect them. Children's Commissioner Rachel D'Souza found nearly 3,000 children were strip-searched between 2018 and mid-2022, and more than half of those searches were conducted without an appropriate adult present. The investigation was launched after a black 15-year-old girl suspected of having marijuana was strip-searched at a London school in 2020 by 2 female officers without another adult present. The girl, identified as Child Q, was menstruating and no drugs were found. A previous report said racism was a likely factor for the humiliating search. The findings follow a scathing report last week that found the public had lost confidence in London's Metropolitan Police and that the force was plagued with institutional racism, misogyny, and homophobia, and did not do enough to remove bad officers. That report was commissioned after an officer raped and killed a young woman. The new report said children as young as 8 were being searched in places that were often inappropriate, such as amusement parks or vehicles, and sometimes even within public view. In some cases, at least one officer present was of a gender different than the child being searched. More than a third of the 2,847 searches were of black children, making them more than 6 times more likely to be searched. Based on population figures, the report said white children were about half as likely to be searched.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Alan Suderman and Sam Metz of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. China's global influence campaign has been surprisingly robust and successful in Utah, an investigation by the Associated Press has found. The world's most powerful communist country and its U.S.-based advocates have spent years building relationships with Utah officials. Legislators in the deeply conservative and religious state have responded by delaying legislation Beijing didn't like, nixing resolutions that conveyed displeasure with China's actions, and expressing support in ways that enhanced the Chinese government's image. The AP's investigation relied on dozens of interviews with key players and the review of hundreds of pages of records, text messages, and emails obtained through public records requests. Beijing's success in Utah shows how pervasive and persistent China has been in trying to influence America, said Frank Montoya Jr., a retired FBI counterintelligence agent who lives in Utah. Utah is an important foothold, he said. If the Chinese can succeed in Salt Lake City, they can also make it in New York and elsewhere. I don't know. But back to the article at hand. The AP review found that China and its advocates won frequent legislative and public relations victories in Utah. Utah lawmakers recorded videos of themselves expressing words of encouragement for the citizens of Shanghai in early 2020, which experts said likely helped the Chinese Communist Party with its messaging. Around the same time, Utah officials were thrilled when Chinese authoritarian leader Xi Jinping sent a letter to fourth-grade students in Utah. A Republican legislator said on the Senate floor that he couldn't help but think how amazing it was that Xi would take the time to write such a remarkable letter. Another GOP senator gushed on his conservative radio show that Xi's letter was so kind and so personal. The letter was heavily covered in Chinese state media, which quoted Utah students calling Xi a kind grandpa, a familiar trope in Chinese propaganda. And the article goes on from there, so I suggest you go ahead and read the rest of that rundown. And right now, we are at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.